They did not fear death. They feared failing the ritual. Before a Viking warrior ever lifted an axe in battle, before blood soaked the snow, before shields shattered and screams filled the air, there was something far worse waiting for him. Something older than war, older than kings. A ritual whispered about in sagas, a ritual that tested not the strength of the body, but the terror of the soul. Because to the Vikings, battle was temporary, dishonor was eternal. Imagine standing in silence under a gray northern sky. The wind cuts through your wool and leather. Your breath fogs the air. Around you stand men who have already proven themselves, warriors whose names are known, whose scars are earned. And you? You are not yet one of them. Ahead lies a ritual so severe that some men broke before it even began. Some begged to be spared. Some were never the same again. And those who failed were remembered, not as cowards, but as warnings. This was not a ceremony of celebration. There were no cheers, no feasting, no songs, only silence. Because what you were about to face was not meant to inspire courage. It was meant to strip it away. The Vikings believed something most modern minds struggle to understand. A man who fears pain fears death. A man who fears death is unworthy of Valhalla. To enter Odin's hall, you did not simply need to die in battle. You needed to prove you could face agony without breaking. And so they devised rituals, brutal, unforgiving, and deeply symbolic, to separate true warriors from those who only pretended to be. Rituals that mirrored the horrors of war, but without the chaos, without the adrenaline, without the mercy of a quick death. Only endurance, only fear, only judgment. One such ritual was considered so terrifying that later Christian writers refused to fully describe it. Another was performed in open view of the community, so that every scream, every tremor, every failure would be remembered. And the most infamous of all was not performed on enemies. It was reserved for their own. Because the Vikings understood something chilling. A warrior who cannot endure controlled suffering will shatter in real battle. In the sagas, we read of men who laughed as blades cut them, who sang as bones broke, who stared death in the eyes without blinking. But those men were not born. They were made. And the making process was hell. Before we reveal the ritual itself, before we uncover how it was performed, and why even seasoned warriors dreaded it, you must first understand why pain was sacred to the Vikings, why suffering was not avoided, but revered, and why the gods themselves demanded it. Because once you understand that, you will realize something horrifying. Battle was the easy part. Pain was not punishment to the Vikings. It was proof. Proof that a man was strong enough to endure the attention of the gods themselves. In the Norse world, the gods were not kind. They did not reward mercy. They did not protect the weak. They tested, and none tested harder than Odin. Odin, the All-Father, was not a god of comfort. He was a god of war, madness, sacrifice, and knowledge earned through suffering. According to the Havamal, Odin did not gain wisdom by prayer. He gained it by hanging himself from the world tree. 9 nights, wounded by a spear, no food, no water, screaming into the void, alone. The Vikings believed this was no metaphor. It was a message. If even a god must suffer to be worthy of power, what excuse does a man have? This belief shaped everything. A Viking warrior was expected to endure pain silently, not because it felt good, but because reacting to pain showed fear. And fear was dangerous. Fear in battle spread like disease. Fear caused hesitation. Fear broke shield walls. So the Vikings trained fear out of their men, not with words, with rituals. Rituals designed to confront a warrior with agony before he ever faced an enemy. One saga tells of young men being deliberately injured, not to cripple them, but to see how they reacted. Did they scream? Did they beg? Did they curse the gods? Or did they remain still, jaw clenched, eyes forward? Because in the Norse worldview, how you suffered mattered more than how much you suffered. A man who cried out in pain disgraced himself. A man who endured in silence gained honor. This belief extended even to death. A warrior who died screaming was not welcomed by the Valkyries. A warrior who died defiant, even smiling, was worthy of Valhalla. And so the rituals became more than preparation. They became judgment. Before a warrior could be trusted with a weapon, before he could stand in the shield wall, before his name could be spoken with respect, he had to prove that pain did not control him. The most terrifying ritual of all was designed with this exact purpose. It was not quick. It was not merciful. And it was not always survivable. It took place in full view of elders and warriors. No distractions, no escape. Just a man, his body, and the limits of his will. The ritual varied slightly between regions, Norway, Denmark, Iceland, but the core remained the same. A controlled act of suffering, one that simulated the helplessness of battle wounds, one that stripped away bravado and revealed truth. Because once the ritual began, there was no enemy to fight, no weapon to swing, no rage to hide behind, only pain and silence. Those who endured were changed forever. Those who failed were never allowed to forget it. And now, it is time to reveal the ritual itself, a ritual so brutal that even modern historians debate whether every detail should be spoken aloud. A ritual whispered in sagas, referenced in skaldic poetry, and feared by those who stood before it. The ritual known to later generations as the trial of endurance. The ritual began before dawn. Darkness was important, because fear grows strongest when the world is quiet. The candidate, often a young man, but sometimes an untested older warrior, was brought to a sacred space. Not a temple, not a hall, but open ground. Earth beneath his feet, sky above his head. The Vikings believed the gods watched more closely under the open sky. The elders formed a circle, not to comfort him, but to trap him. There would be no turning away, no place to hide. Weapons were visible, not to be used, only to remind him of what awaited if he proved worthy. The man was stripped of armor, sometimes stripped to the waist. Cold air against bare skin. Already, the body began to suffer. Then came the first command. Silence. From this moment forward, he was not allowed to cry out. No screams, no prayers, no words. To speak was to fail. To beg was to disgrace himself. The ritual had many forms, but the most feared involved controlled injury. A blade, often duller than a battlefield weapon, was drawn slowly across the skin. Not deep enough to kill, deep enough to hurt. The point was not blood. The point was reaction. Did the man flinch? Did his breath break? Did his face betray fear? The elders watched everything. The slightest weakness was noted. In some regions, the ritual escalated. The man's arms were bound behind him. Helplessness was intentional. In battle, wounds come when you cannot defend yourself. This simulated that moment. Pressure was applied to joints, shoulders, wrists, knees, forcing the body into unnatural positions, not to break them, but to bring pain to its edge. Sweat ran down faces even in freezing air. Teeth cracked from clenching. Still, the man was expected to remain silent, because silence was strength. Then came the moment many never forgot. the final test. The blade was pressed, not cut, against the throat or chest. The elders asked one question, not aloud, but with their eyes. Will you remain still, even now? Because this moment reflected the truth of Viking belief. A warrior must accept death without panic. Those who trembled failed. Those who cried out were removed from the circle, not killed, but marked. They would never stand in the shield wall, never raid, never earn glory. They lived, but they lived with shame. Those who endured were released, not praised, not celebrated, just nodded to. Because true honor did not need applause. Afterward, the wounds were treated. The man was allowed to eat, to sleep. But something had changed. He had learned that pain was not the enemy. Fear was. And in battle, that lesson saved lives. Some historians believe this ritual explains why Viking warriors seemed fearless to their enemies, why they advanced into spears, why they laughed in combat, why they fought on despite horrific injuries. They had already faced worse, not chaos, not rage, but controlled suffering, and they had survived it. But there was one ritual, darker than all the others, reserved not for initiation, but for judgment. A ritual so infamous it still chills historians today, and that ritual was called the blood eagle. Few rituals in history inspire as much fear as the blood eagle. Its name alone is enough to unsettle even hardened historians. But here is the truth most videos never explain. The blood eagle was not a common execution. It was not routine. And it was never casual. If it happened at all, and evidence suggests it did, though rarely, it was reserved for the worst betrayals imaginable. Oathbreakers, kings who murdered kin, men whose crimes demanded more than death. The sagas describe it in chilling detail. The victim was laid face down. Ribs were separated from the spine, lungs pulled outward, forming the shape of wings, an offering to Odin. But modern scholars debate how literal these descriptions are. Some argue the ritual was exaggerated by Christian scribes to portray the Vikings as monsters. Others believe it was symbolic, or performed only partially. Yet what matters most is not whether it happened exactly as described. What matters is why the Vikings believed in it. Because to them, the blood eagle was not about cruelty. It was about cosmic balance. A man who shattered the moral order of the world could not be allowed a normal death. Pain, in this case, was not preparation. It was judgment. But here is the haunting realization. For the Vikings, this ritual was terrifying, not because of its brutality, but because of what it represented. A death without honor, a death watched by the gods, a death that closed the gates of Valhalla forever. This is why Viking warriors feared ritual failure more than battle. In battle, death could bring glory. In ritual, failure brought erasure, your name forgotten, your deeds ignored, your soul denied its place. This belief shaped one of the most fearsome warrior cultures in history. Not because they loved violence, but because they understood something modern society avoids. Fear must be confronted, or it will rule you. The Vikings faced fear deliberately. They stripped away comfort. They tested the mind before trusting the body. They believed pain was temporary, but honor was eternal. And so when Viking warriors marched into battle, they did not do so blindly. They had already stood unarmed, already endured suffering, already proven themselves to the gods. To them, battle was not the ultimate test. It was simply the final chapter. So the next time you hear tales of fearless Vikings charging into death, remember this: they were not fearless by nature. They were forged. Forged by rituals more terrifying than battle itself. Forged by silence. Forged by pain. Forged by belief. And that is the true Viking saga.